Hello everyone, this is Mix Awesome Manatee, and this is another unscripted tangent. So I've been having the hardest time with this particular project. As a writing experiment, I basically delved into fanfiction. We all start there, right? But sometimes we go back just to experiment with characters we're familiar with, experiment with tropes we're familiar with, experiment with a universe we're familiar with. Instead of having to put forth the work on characterizing people, instead of putting forth the work to build out and flesh out a world, instead of putting the work to basically have your training wheels so that you could basically give us training wheels so that we could exercise our thoughts with familiar characters. I've had a big account on fanfiction.net. I probably can't find it anywhere, but there was a Star Wars project I was working on. Again, it's fanfiction, so. And long ago, in a world not so far away, I thought, I bet I could write better prequels than George Lucas.
Star Wars The Phantom Menace was the most disappointing thing since my son.
I thought very confidently as a dumb, young, brash idiot. And then the sequel trilogy happened.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the...
I loved The Force Awakens when it first came out. I liked it as time went on. The Last Jedi, I really loved, and still do, even though it does have its flaws. Rise of Skywalker...
Somehow Palpatine returned.
But the thing is, all of us, as a fandom, everyone within the fandom, can try and recapture the magic. We could try to retell the story that was. And we might still even have the same sentiment as George Lucas, a frustration with the status quo, just a complete dissatisfaction with the way we do things, seeing ways that have been done better before, and our society absolutely taking a shit on that.
You're forced to make a particular kind of movie. And I used to say this all the time when people, back when Russia was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And they'd say, oh, but aren't you so glad that you're in America? I said, well, I know a lot of Russian filmmakers. They have a lot more freedom than I have. All they have to do is be careful about criticizing the government. Otherwise, they can do anything they want.
And so what do you have to do?
You have to adhere to a very narrow line of commercialism.
And just doing whatever they want to do anyway, at the expense of the masses. But that's another video. We have these sentiments, right? Maybe share similar sentiments. The thing is, George Lucas has dealt with different things in his life to come to the point that he has come to. He has different cards to play. For the longest time, I didn't know that he did not become a director right off the bat. You wouldn't think that with all the entrepreneurial nonsense that this propaganda machine tries to cram down our throats that, oh no, George Lucas has always been a director. No, he's never had a day where he had to pay his own bills, except he has had those days. And actually, that didn't ruin anything for me. That actually made it better for me, if anything. Back in the day, George Lucas worked with the universities. He had taken on odd jobs within the universities. It was a while before he became a director, let's just say that. And to learn that he was a normal, and he's always insisted that he's a normal person. It was everyone else who insisted that George Lucas was this otherworldly deliverance of a message that humanity could have never comprehended, except George Lucas doesn't give himself any credit for that.
I attribute most of the success to the psychological underpinnings, which have been around for thousands of years, and the people still react the same way to the stories as they always have.
You know why? While he did realize the idea, and while he was the one that put the idea into presentation, there were others that walked before he could run. The whole point of Joseph Campbell's A Hero with 1,000 Faces was that all mythologies around the world share common traits with one another that illustrate the human condition. I came across a post recently where nonfiction is where you learn information. Fiction is truth through imagination. We could compare how the Empire is basically the space Nazis, and we can compare how Jedi are basically space samurai / Templar, We could do all the historical comparisons and whatnot, but like what it takes away from is that no matter where you come from, you're still very much a sentient being that reacts to the same things in the same ways. Whether you are a hero from Greece or Rome or China or India, and you may have different values that you contend against, the human spirit still perseveres the same. It still tries to find a purpose in the universe. It still tries to find connection with the creation around it. Let's reel it back. Let's get all the flowery poetry before we turn into Jordan Peterson. So what am I trying to say with this? I tried rewriting Star Wars the way I would rewrite Star Wars. And I come to realize something. I really didn't rewrite much. And as I was writing these, I'm just like, this isn't my story. It stopped me for a bit, because it's like, I love these stories. I grew up with these stories. But it's not my story. And I was trying to tell a story that is bigger than life itself. Because that's what Star Wars is in the mainstream continuity. It is larger than life stories on where their actions affected the entire fate of the galaxy, and I just come to really sit down with myself and be like, this isn't my story. Nothing about this speaks to me. I mean, Clone Wars connects to me more. Clone Wars connects to me more because it's not focused on the fate of the galaxy. It focuses more on the human experience of it. And I think with the sequel trilogy, I think I started getting caught up in the same pitfalls that people who are writing the sequels were caught in. How can I make it more epic? How can I make it more emblematic of our times now? And of course, you might have some really good insight, but like, if you have so much depth and so much development, why are you continuing to write a Star Wars story? Why not just write your own space opera? So that's what I did. I went and wrote my own damn space opera, and I'm still trying to make it happen. But George Lucas, when he was... There are many reasons and many inspirations on what he took to write Star Wars. One of his primary ones was a frustration against the Vietnam War, a frustration against Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal, and it allowed him to look back and reflect on the entire history of his country and society as a whole, and really put into perspective what he's come to learn over the years. And as much as I have my criticisms, I still have a lot to thank George Lucas for when the prequels were made, because a lot of people's like, people aren't going to get it. No, people do get it.
Emperor Palpatine was a little-known senator from Naboo, small planet. He finances terrorists to attack the planet, and then he plays victim and says that the pacifist republic isn't doing enough to help him with the terrorist invasion, the Trade Federation invasion. Who even speak in Chinese accents. It's all geopolitical. He then goes and catapults himself into the role of Chancellor. Episode 2 launches terror attacks all over the galaxy with groups he's secretly financing through his backers in the Trade Federation. He turns around double crosses in the end, which always happens. Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, Maoist China, learn from history. And now he's got this big imperial army to counter this outside threat run by Count Dooku, the Osama bin Laden guy that actually works for him, and they meet in secret. In episode 3, he launches an attack on the imperial capital himself. He launches an attack on New York. And in the end, he then sets up the Jedi and says they're terrorists and has the anti-terror forces go in and wipe them out to bring peace. Now, the media could not understand. Adults cannot understand children-level ideas, okay? Child-level ideas. Child level. How can you not understand it?
And we're starting to get that more and more now. It's just, it wasn't my story to tell. Just like the reason Guardians of the Galaxy was just not another rehashing of Star Wars or Spaceballs, even though it easily could have turned into that. Guardians of the Galaxy was a story that was true to James Gunn's own style and fashion. Star Wars was a story that was true to George Lucas's own style and fashion. And after seeing his filmography lineup, it does make a lot of sense. You have American Graffiti, you have THX 1138, and he was going to try to do a Flash Gordon film, but the IP owner said no.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go build my own theme park with blackjack and hookers. In fact, forget the park.
People come to love it. It's a good mental exercise to go back to when, you're really burnt out, you're broken, and you take a rest for a bit. Take a rest for a bit if you feel writer's block. You're probably fatigued from all the other things you've done before, so you might just want to, I don't know, take a freaking break. Give yourself a break. Give yourself a mental block. At least 2 weeks. I mean, on top of freaking, you probably gotta pay your bills, you gotta go do your job. Like, just take a break. You have freaking earned it, okay? When you don't really feel like developing anything, when you just wanna something to play with. You know, it's the same shit you do when you're a kid and you get home and you play with action figures. I don't know if anybody does that nowadays, but I know when I was growing up, I did that. Or even like it. Okay, let's take it a step further. Okay, you just want to play some Star Wars Battlefront or some Halo or Fortnite. I don't fucking know. Whatever video game you play. Sometimes a video game, but a lot of online games don't really have a sense of. There's implied story, but there's a lot of story and lore you can fill in. But everything else is just kind of filled in by the audience, by the fandom. Like, we don't know how much history Tracer and Widowmaker have, but we do know for a fact that they do have some kind of rivalry based off those two interactions alone. But the way they act, the way they look at each other, it feels like there's more history than just those two scenes alone. But you know, everybody does it, where like you kind of fill in a little bit of lore. If the lore doesn't state it, then you are absolutely free to go in and, you know, throw your own bit of a spin on it. I mean, the Has-Been Hotel fandom is full of that. Kingdom Hearts back in the day was so full of that. There's no shame in writing fanfiction. There's no shame in any of that. If you think you're going to do a better version of this movie than the other people, that's probably the wrong way to go about it, in all honesty. Because you can lose your motivation to do that really quickly. Because if your motivation is spite, I mean, it could. No. Spite just does not. Spite is a very in the moment thing. It is not a healthy long term motivation. You gotta have a reason to be telling these stories, and spite is just not a good one. When you're writing your movies, shows, games, whatever lore, whatever you're writing, you have to have a message that you're really telling. All the magic that you're using should be a expression of the concept that you're trying to outline. You know, for example, in Avatar, fire is an expression of passion, and Zuko had the hardest time because for the longest time he did have passion. He had passion for finding the Avatar, but once he captured the Avatar, he lost his purpose. So the journey of relearning firebending was relearning his sole purpose in life. What ignites his passion? What gives him a reason to express his chi? Earthbending is a firm and solid foundation, which Aang has to struggle with because Aang is a very loosey-goosey, kind of flaky kind of person. Earth is like completely opposite of what he is. And then you have waterbending, which is a go with the flow yet very strong kind of energy. And as helping and healing as it can be, it could also be quite destructive. But each of these elements were used to tell different concepts throughout the universe. There was a reason to tell these kind of stories. They didn't just lay on the four elements and then that's it. They had so much more to say about everything else too, and how it all connected. Know your story and know where to tell it. You can try to say you understand why they were telling Avatar, but you can only guess it. You can like get it from their interviews and whatnot, so you know that's hard evidence right there. And only you can tell your story if you have a story to tell, which I'm sure all of you do, especially if you're on here doing creative shit. Before you go off trying to write somebody's story, just think, is this really your story to tell? And honestly, that's it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. And when you're writing your own story, don't be ashamed to write fan fiction. But on the same note, if it's not your story to tell, there's no shame in that either. But thank you so much.